going to win it, and the new world record, taken the distance into a new era.
Most of the guys who run today probably have no idea who he is, that he was the first guy to run under 48 seconds and the first African to win a gold medal, anything under 800 meters. So he's a historical figure in the history of track and field forever.
The story is clearer every time I tell it. It was a little difficult at first. You see, Uganda is a good land, a big garden, a cow, and you can live. It is also a land of rumor. I don't know why. We get enough news, but still, the rumors fly. I think you will find Uganda a peaceful country, just a little nervous.
I had the ultimate respect for him amongst all the other athletes. He was really something else. If it wasn't for him, there would be no me.
With the whole stadium in respect to this small nation, I felt myself hit with feverish thrill and pride.
John Akii Bua showed that if you believe in your ability, have desire, discipline, determination, you can do great things. John Akii Bua had all three in the Mankiller event, the 400 hurdles.
When Idi Amin came to power, I was ignorant of the government machinery, but it was to begin the first page of one of Africa's unspeakable atrocities. Amin wasn't committed to rule, he was committed to kill.
It was a genuine concern with those of us who liked him as a man to think that his life could be in danger, particularly as he was such a high-profile person from a rival tribe.
It was good for us to be superstars. Our tribe were being murdered. So Amin would parade us on the TV. You are saying I'm killing the Langis. Who are these people? They are here.
I hold him responsible for the downfall of Akii Bua. It killed his spirit.
I had won the highest honor for my country. I couldn't go into exile. Uganda was, in effect, a prison.
What is your profession?
Oh, I'm a police officer.
Police. That way you can run after the robbers.
Right, when it comes to leg work, we can go after them.
Is the medal for you or your team?
Yes, I'm going to take it back to Uganda. It will be for the whole team and for the whole Ugandan. Right. Because in the medal brackets, you know, where they count how many medals won by country, they will say Uganda won 1 gold medal. They will not write Akii Bua won 1 gold medal.
I'm not able to pinpoint which year I started being a sportsman. I still remember my father used to race us for sweets, whereby the winner gets more. I was a tall-legged boy, but not fast enough to earn the sweets. I was too slow. My father was a county chief and lived a legendary life. He married 8 wives and I was, hold your breath, one of 43 children, all living together in one compound in the north of Uganda. Like my father, I exhibited the talent of a great hunter. I was obsessed. There was nothing on earth I could compare to hunting and the respect it earned me. My handcrafted catapult and sharp shooting made snakes rare on the compound. I became the official supplier of fowls and partridge whenever father required. As a teenager in the village, I had to learn subsistence farming. The worst part was waking up at 5:30 to move the oxen to the garden. It was too much for me, and I had no shoes to protect me from being pricked by thorn trees and snakes. In 1964, my father died, and that was the hardest blow I can ever remember. I had to leave school and take responsibility to earn some money, help Mom feed us, and adjust to life as a cultivator.
He saw no life in the village with our father gone. My mother inspired him said, "Now, you're a young man. If you remain here in the village, you're going to rot. Go out into the world and look for opportunities to develop your talent." I imagine he left for the unknown. At that time, he was not sure where he was going, but he must have felt that he was going for adventures.
Still a teenager, John Akii Bua left his village in the north of the country in search of a better life in the capital city, Kampala. The desire for freedom was sweeping across Uganda in the 1960s, as the country gained independence from its colonial master, Great Britain. John's lack of education was a barrier to well-paid work, and so he settled in a slum, where he lodged with cousins and worked as a cashier in their bar. But he had greatly improved as a sportsman, and that talent secured his first opportunity. John Akii Bua was recruited by the police force after shining in a 30-minute football trial, played barefoot.
That was part and parcel of marketing the police force. Some of us, including John, joined because we thought that the police force was a superb club for sports, where young people could actually show their talent.
Police used to recruit athletes. They want strong women, strong men to come and join police. They give you uniforms, you are paying salary, you feel so motivated.
At police training school, there is one quick demonstration of how to march and no more. All drill commands are English with a dialect which takes weeks for recruits to learn. With so many things to be done, the mistakes are so many. The worst moments are when the instructor comes at you with eyes open like an attacking monkey, kicks your legs hard with his drill shoes, or bombs you with abusive words for any mistakes you do. Pulling of ear, lips, or hair are the immediate punishments you receive when you go wrong.
The atmosphere was good, friendly, but very strict discipline was observed here. Actually, the training of policemen in those days was by the book to make Uganda police one of the best in East Africa.
The British had established a strong tradition of organized sports in Uganda. Talented athletes were given salaried jobs in the police force, the army, and the prison service. But for most of the year, they were allowed to concentrate on their sports. John had always preferred football and volleyball, but in the police, found his potential blossoming on the track.
John had a natural talent. You could see in him a great athlete. We would train twice a day. After you had worked out the load of work which you think would be substantial for him, you would come back and say, "Hi, coach, but what about having 2 or 3 more?" The coaches in the prisons, in the police, in the schools, and so on, were quite good. They were not so well trained, technically, but the athletes were very competitive.
My journey to eventual sports fame began when I joined the police track club. With compulsory rise at 5:45, my strength was beginning to gather, and my mind flashed with ideas of what event to take. At the Police Track and Field Championships, with the Police Inspector General present as guest of honor, I was entered for 7 events and won 5. My prizes were table alarm clocks, blankets, and a tea kettle.
I only wish people could recall what fame John brought to Uganda. I feel sad because what John should have left as a legacy is excellency in the field of track and field athletics. There should be aspiration for everybody wanting to be John Akii Bua. He switched on the light in as far as world athletics is concerned. But as time goes, I think people forget. They forget very fast. It is unfortunate that in other countries, they know and talk more about John Akii Bua than we talk about him in Uganda.
Uganda's National Council of Sports recognised the need to modernise their organisation and embrace the worldwide advance in coaching techniques. The raw talent nurtured in the services, allied to the young country's desire to win medals, would present a golden opportunity for a school teacher and fledgling athletics coach from the most unlikely of places, Cheshire in the north of England.
People told Madeline and I that we were mad to think about going there, because between 1962 and 1966 there had been a fair bit of political and tribal hassle going on in the country, and I think there was still one or two news items which were a bit inflammatory, but it was an adventure as far as we were concerned. I mean, I could have come here and made a mess of it and crept back to the UK and nobody would have known I'd been here. Facilities were dreadful, grass tracks, and that was about it. It was a problem of, 1 square meal a day, let alone 3. In a way, I call myself lucky because I came to understand pretty quickly what counts. And it isn't wonderful facilities and wonderful backup within those facilities, it's just having first-rate athletes. It's character building, certainly, trying to operate on wonderful tracks like this. I mean, the most impressive thing about it, I guess we had 3 or 4 high-performance centres, which are in vogue in Europe at the moment, especially in the UK, but there was a sort of an instituted regime whereby they would have to work for 3 months of the year, and perhaps for the other 6 to 9 months of the year, I could have them to coach them. So it was ripe for development, really.
In 1968, we started to see a certain white man at our training sessions. I kept my distance. After all, I was no star. His name was difficult to pronounce, so we simply called him Muzungu.
Oh, well, Muzungu is a white man. And for us, we used to call Malcolm Muzungu. That was the only name that we had for him. It was Coach Muzungu, Coach Muzungu. Hey, but Muzungu, leave him alone, Muzungu.
Muzungu started to spend more time with me because of the hurdle techniques which I had to master. But the team began to bombard me with advice to completely avoid Muzungu and be careful with his training. I started to dissent his technical advice and refused to do his workouts.
In a way, I suppose I had to prove my effectiveness in a pretty short time. But inevitably, when a new person comes into a particular community, people are, I guess, wary of them if they don't know too much about them, and they knew completely nothing about me because there wasn't too much to know, really.
Malcolm was a quiet and very observant character. Of course, I think also John was a ready-made athlete for Malcolm. It's like when 2 people come together who really fit.
Muzungu cleverly and skillfully moved to dismantle my imaginary Berlin Wall against him. And one by one, we started to fall into his stride. 1968 was an Olympic year, and even me, who had a mediocre performance in the sprint hurdles, would talk of being able to make the team in Mexico. The qualifying mark was 14.3 seconds, and though I worked my ass off, I was terribly dejected when I failed to reach the Olympic standard.
It was pleasing, really, that all the good athletes had expectations of going to an Olympic Games. That they don't understand how big an Olympic Games is or how good you have to be to get there. And he aspired to going, and frankly, he just wasn't good enough. I wasn't the most popular person in Uganda at the time, as far as he was concerned.
A new world record, and Hemery won it all the way. He killed the rest, he paralysed them. Good gracious me, he was up in the air for an ages team.
The Mexico Games were dominated by an explosive combination of sporting prowess and political upheaval. Bob Beeman's world record long jump and Dick Fosbury's groundbreaking method of tackling the high jump would be talked about for decades. But so would the massacre of hundreds of student protesters by the security forces before the Games. And the Black Power salutes of Tommy Smith and John Carlos on the podium following their 200 metres final. The intrusion of politics into sport reflected the instabilities of a rapidly changing world. In Uganda, the colonial administration had sown the seeds for political conflict by favouring a select few tribes over the rest. Malcolm Arnold, an outsider, had no interest in tribal rivalries, only in coaching the best athletes to reach their potential. His modern, technical approach reaped rewards as several athletes set national records that still stand today. Talents coming through included Judith Aya and William Koskei from prisons, Abraham Munabi from the university, and William Dralu from the army. All worked under the direction of national coach Malcolm Arnold. A buzz had been created, and the response from the public was wholehearted.
During our time, when there was an athletics meeting somewhere, people would really come in a big number. And during those days, when you perform well barefooted, they come and bring you shoes.
We had the East African Championships here, the year after the '68 Olympics, and we had a full Kenyan team here. But 15,000 people turned up, and it was one hell of an occasion, really. All on the banking all the way around. How we managed to accommodate everybody, I don't know, but there we are. It's just a case of they turned up and everybody let them in.
Malcolm Arnold's growing prominence brought him to the attention of the head of the army, Major General Idi Amin. The army's sports officer was publicly criticised by senior army figures for supporting the appointment of an Englishman rather than a Ugandan.
One of the coaches accused me that I favour white people than the Africans, and I allowed Malcolm to take over the training of national team instead of them, because they felt that time it was time for the Africans to be the ones in charge of everything. Idi Amin called me and I explained to him. I said, this man came here in '68 and he's training our people, and I felt that he should be in charge of the team. People don't know that there are certain areas that needs more expertise, but I stuck to my guns, and Malcolm proved me right in the long run.
The national coach believed that Akii Bua had the potential for greatness, but not as a 110-metre hurdler. His assessment from the outset was that John's natural strength made him better suited to the more gruelling 400-metre hurdles.
To be a sprint hurdler, you need to be able to run really, really fast, and he didn't have that. You look at the best sprint hurdlers of today, and you take the hurdles away, and they're still very, very quick runners. But he was quick, and he'd had enormous endurance over 400 metres.
They used to call it the Mankiller event, because essentially you sacrifice your body on a day-to-day basis in training, and definitely out on the track. Most people become frustrated with hurdles because you definitely are gonna fall and get beat up. You're gonna have your knees scarred up, and the first time you really crash in the hurdles, if you don't get up right away, you can tell right at that moment if someone's gonna be a hurdler or not. You have to have a tremendous amount of willpower. Very few 400-meter runners actually become 400-meter hurdlers because they can't operate over hurdles when they run out of gas. So if you don't like running in pain, you won't be a 400 hurdler. It's a special person that runs the event that even wants to. I learned to enjoy it after a period of time, and then became much more tolerable when I finally figured out what kind of training was necessary to make it as easy as possible.
The Commonwealth Games in Edinburgh, Scotland, was my first chance to represent Uganda in the big games. The number of athletes and spectators were many. Being in a completely new place, I was driven to fantasy land. Malcolm again suggested to me that I must move to the 400-meter hurdles. I told him that the event was too hard to run. Besides, I was unable to withstand its torturous training sessions.
He didn't want to consider 400-meter hurdling because he was going to succeed as a sprint hurdler, and he couldn't be told. And as it happens, I'd entered in for the 400-meter hurdles as well, me being just as stubborn as him. It was as plain as the nose on his face which event he should be doing.
The 400 metres hurdles final, and check who's the first to rise.
Despite his dedication to the 110-metre hurdles, Akii Bua was knocked out in the semi-final. With very little preparation for the 400-metre hurdles, he not only qualified for the final, but finished a remarkable fourth.
My body twitched with thrill as I took my mark. For the first half of the race, I heard a lot of yelling and was enjoying the race up front. Then suddenly I saw Koske, Kipkemboi, and John Sherwood surge towards the finish line and pounced back into running. I was very relaxed after the race and told my coach that I was not tired because I ran with little effort and was left with plenty of energy.
He realised what his potential was in the longer event. And that's a tremendously motivating factor for an athlete, because then they can then put themselves into an equation and say, well, I'm there. At the end of this year, I'm 10th in the world, so if I pull my finger out and put a bit more effort into it, then I'll be climbing the ladder.
Ugandan army have overthrown the government of the 46-year-old President Obote. The coup started at about 2 o'clock this morning, and after hours of confusion, an unidentified voice on the national radio announced that the army had taken control.
Idi Amin's military coup was initially welcomed by Britain and other Western powers, who believed that President Obote had taken Uganda too close to the Soviet Union. John Akii Bua knew that his tribe, the Langi, might face a backlash with the arrival of Amin. But as a sportsman, he at least could count on the protection of the new president. Idi Amin had served in the British Army with the King's African Rifles, where his physical power and ruthlessness in battle were honed by his officers. He had boxed for his country and seemed genuinely determined that Uganda's sports fraternity be given every opportunity to excel and bring glory to the nation.
I wanted to tell you this. As a boxer, the only chance to defeat the referee who are against you or against the country is to win by knockout.
He really put in a lot of emphasis on sports. He was attending training himself, football, boxing, all sports activities. I remember one night we were asleep, and he, just as we had just slept around 10, 11, he appeared at night, driving himself to come and see us in the camp. And he would ask, have you had enough food? Are you satisfied? We said, food is wonderful. He would tell his bodyguards, please give them dollars. One time his bodyguard said, no, the money was finished. He said, go and print more dollars. He promised us shops and vehicles. To give somebody that assurance that I'm going to give you a car, a free car and a shop, you can commit suicide in the field.
For 12 days after Idi Amin took power, we never got close to the track. When we resumed our training sessions, fellow athletes narrated stories of many army lorries with dead bodies in them. There were always reports of people being shot or arrested, beaten or dragged from their cars by soldiers. I was then absolutely ignorant of the government machinery, but it was to begin the first page of Uganda's darkest history and one of Africa's unspeakable atrocities.
The public face of Idi Amin, the sportsman, the joker, the man of the people, would blind the outside world to the gruesome reality of life in Uganda during this period.
I won.
At home, Amin sought to boost his image by exploiting any success in sport. And John Akii Bua was striding into the general's attention, now working harmoniously with Malcolm Arnold and dramatically improving at the 400-metre hurdles.
When you see a track of athletics and you see people in the last 100 metres seem to be getting faster and faster, it is an illusion. What's actually happening is that the others are deteriorating at a faster pace. But if you can make that differential so that you're only losing maybe half a yard in that 100 metres, you will be immense. Every 35 metres, you've got a hurdle to negotiate. And the hurdle to negotiate is going to feel different or look different in your first 200 and your last 100. You've still got to have that determination to charge at that hurdle. Don't slow down, you've got to attack that hurdle. Because once you decide to go, you've got to go. It's almost metronomic. You've got to be able to switch into a gear that is tick-tock, tick-tock. And when your lungs are screaming, when your legs are gone, your mind has still got to be at tick-tock, 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 and deliver.
Malcolm Arnold's installation of an expanded competition structure was beginning to pay dividends. At a Kampala League meeting in May 1971, Akii Bua smashed the African record, becoming the first African hurdler to break the 50-second barrier. Kenyan journalists didn't believe that such a time was possible on a grass track. One scoffed that the Ugandans must have used alarm clocks to time the race.
The Kenyans generally thought of themselves as very superior. I think they tended to regard the Tanzanians and the Ugandans as up-country hillbillies, really. And we're always amazed at any good performances that came out of those countries.
Nevertheless, Akii Bua was selected to represent Africa in the US. In the biggest race of his fledgling career, he had to prove that his remarkable performance in Uganda had not been a one-off.
For 3 or 4 years, no one in Uganda was good enough to represent us overseas. I wanted to change that, to show that Uganda could also produce good athletes, like the Kenyans. I knew Koske was behind, closing in like a panther behind its prey. After the 5th hurdle, I attacked the bend like an African squirrel with an anthill in sight and a dog at its tail. 14 stride pattern up to the 8th hurdle. 15 strides to the 9th and 10th with no major problem. I cruised the 40 meters to the finish line with no veins out from my neck. I was told my time. 49 seconds flat. Ranked 6th fastest ever in the world. The alarm clock issue was finally and effectively buried. I was asked how I felt about my time and what I would like to do in the future. I said for sure I would race 400-meter hurdles in Munich at the Olympics.
The fact is that the athlete goes out there and learns a damn sight more than the coach. He'd go out there and he'd perform, and then he'd come back and talk about the race for 20 minutes or so. It was staggering, really. So that was a really first-class part of my education, and which I took note of, and it's a wonderful reference library, really.
The relationship between the coach and his athlete was given added urgency because Malcolm Arnold had decided that he would not renew his contract in Idi Amin's Uganda after Munich. If John reached the Olympic final, it would be his and Malcolm's last race together.
We looked at when the Olympic Games were in Munich in 1972, and then you plan backwards. In the preparation period, you would build a foundation of work, and in the competition period, you hone what you've done to a very fine edge so that you hopefully reach a peak and produce the right performance at the right time.
John Akii Bua was in only his 2nd season as a serious 400-meter hurdler. In Munich, he would race for Olympic glory against hurdlers like Ralph Mann of America and reigning champion David Hemery of Great Britain, who had benefited from years of training with the best resources the world could offer.
We still didn't have good facilities, only a grass track. It took months to get spiked shoes sent from Europe, but I had a chance to be the first champion from Uganda. I worked hard.
John was technically raw, but what he lacked in polish, he made up in toughness and an awesome capacity for work. His training regime, which he meticulously recorded, far exceeded those of any of his contemporaries, and would acquire legendary status in the sport.
The transition between that chap in 71 to the beginning of 72, the guy is doing monster sessions. This is somebody who believes within themselves they have the ability to go under 48 seconds. And he wants to be the Olympic champion.
I started with lots of cross-country. I ran hard, twice a day. Then I set up 5 high hurdles every lap, put on my 25-pound weighted vest, and ran 1,500 meters over the hurdles 4 times. That was it, every day, building stamina.
He's got back-to-back 600s. In a swift time, backed up after 10 minutes, another 2 sets of 600s with a 25-pound jacket on. And hold on, I'm not finished. He's going to simulate the last 100 meters of the race and have the hurdles on the way. Mate, I'm talking to you and you do not know what that is. That is a man killer.
The police gave me $150 to go to Kabale, where the hills are very steep. Twice a day I ran 6 times up a 600-meter hill, always with my weighted vest. My coach gave me a program, but I did more than he asked. I don't think it was natural to do as much as I did, but I grew strong.
I could never have attempted that sort of session myself. People today on synthetic tracks with perfect spikes in California are going to look at that and say, maybe not today, can I have another 2 years, coach?
Munich, the Olympic city, on this, the eve of the 20th celebration of the modern Games. The Games will be watched in every corner of the earth. Competitions which in most events are bound to reflect the inevitable progress the world's athletes have made.
Athletics is a very hard and tough event, and you know that anybody who has got the dedication, the discipline, to stick at that event and work hard, has got a very special something. And I think that gives you a fraternity and a bonding, maybe not found in many other areas of life. And so you do begin to realise that you borrow the record, you borrow the time, that you elevate a bar to a level where you are saying to those yet to come, step in, step up, and leaving a legacy that track and field athletics itself can only bring.
With lots of multiple flags of countries taking part in the Olympics, I felt myself hit with feverish thrill and pride. I was handed a full suitcase which included all the needs for every Ugandan Olympian. I shared my room with sprinter William Dralu and Abraham Munabi, the triple jumper. The disco played a big part to suppress my fear for the competition. Instead of taking to bed for a good rest, I was among the disco crowd who applauded one of my track idols, John Carlos, on the dance floor. Coach Arnold appeared just before midnight, pulled me out of the disco and walked me back to my bed to sleep.
For most people in Great Britain, we were looking at David Hemery, and what was he going to do? You know, can he defend his title? Can he break his own record?
It's happening, Great Britain! David Hemery wins for Britain!
That was the most convincing track victory of the Games. A gold medal and a world record in the same race. The record still stands, but Hemery has shown the world how this race should be run. Who are his main rivals in Munich? Well, the nearest to his world record time is the best of the Americans, Ralph Mann. Another medal contender must be John Akii Bua of Uganda, who finished second to Hemery in this year's 3A's championships, but just look at his finish after hitting a hurdle badly. But it's Ralph Mann who clocks 48.4, the fastest time in the world this year.
There is a myth that people in high countries and little oxygen are exceptionally good sportsmen. Is that true?
Well, to a very certain degree, yes, but that's only a very small degree. They have to work very, very hard indeed to reach the standard that Akii has reached. It's not because he's at high altitude, it's because he's worked hard.
You can't afford to go empty-headed and yell and scream and just enjoy the situation. You've got to concentrate and look at what they're doing and see how well they put things together. Because we'd rehearsed so well in training, then I didn't expect it to be anything other than that, because I knew he was a great athlete.
Those four go into tomorrow's Olympic final. And Akii Bua spells out the danger to David Hemery.
For the first time, I felt a shiver of fear and nervousness sweeping my body. For the rest of the day, I shivered with nerves every half hour. From 9:30, my nerves became uncontrollable. My heart beat faster and ran through my upper stomach with the speed of a machine gun. I couldn't remain in one place for a long time. Even the disco could not impress me anymore. I met Coach Arnold shortly before midnight, and we went together to my room. Muzungu opened his bag and took out 4 bottles of German sect champagne and gave me 2. After I had finished the first bottle, he cleared his throat, then knocked it straight to me that he had the lane draw in his bag. On hearing the words, lane draw, my body hardened as if somebody had hit me.
In the random lane draw, John Akii Bua was handed lane 1, the hardest lane from which to win.
Being in lane 1 is almost like a curse. It really comes down to physics. When you run around a turn at a high rate of speed, the only thing that's forcing you to make the turn is the pressure that you're putting on your outer leg to continue to make you turn, so you're turning on every step. It takes a lot more force to make that turn because you're traveling at a higher speed and the radius is shorter, so you burn more energy. He probably felt that he was disadvantaged and knew that he had to run a very tight race. His main competitors were in much, much better positions.
I thought sleep would relieve me of the burden, but I had light sleep for 2 hours only. I kept visualizing the Olympic 400-meter hurdles final, and the man who always appeared was the Olympic champion and world record holder, David Hemery of Great Britain. His image was a terror for me. The next morning, I had breakfast alone in the cafeteria. I wasn't able to swallow any solid food. On Coach's arrival in my room, I was hit with coldness, which occupied my body. I trembled as I put on my tracksuit. For 1 hour, Malcolm Arnold repeatedly asked me, "Are you all right?" Over 100 times. I saw him light his cigarettes the wrong way round. He threw away others immediately after lighting them. His cigarettes made me feel very bad in the stomach. I had known Arnold for 4 years as Uganda's national coach, as my personal coach, and above all, as my friend. He always coached up to the last minute before competition, reminding me of stride patterns, where to switch in time of trouble. He rarely wished me good luck.
When you get to the athletic arena, when you get to Olympic Games, when you get to world-class level, there is, in a certain few, people who've got the talent, they've got the discipline, and then they've got this ability, when they step into the arena, when it's do or die, when it's today, not tomorrow, when it's the be of the bang, to let it all happen, to be focused, to channel it right there and then, and bring home the big G, to bring home that gold. And there's only a few people who've got all the constellation right to deliver. John Akii Bua, David Hemery had all 3 in the Mankiller event, the 400 hurdles.
10 minutes before the final, Muzungu said one sentence which I will never forget, an order which overcame all my nervousness and fears. He said, "You are in the final. One of them is yours." He never mentioned the word medal.
It's a good start. And it's Ralph Mann going particularly hard with Hemery now beginning to cut him back. And it's Hemery still leading. Akii Bua on the inside is getting left behind a little bit. And Hemery with a clear lead now, with Akii Bua coming on the inside. Akii Bua coming on the inside. 2 hurdles to go, and Akii Bua of Uganda's coming, and so too is Ralph Mann. Next to the last barrier, and Akii Bua leads from Hemery. The last one to go, and the African's going to win it. Hemery in second place, and Ralph Mann fighting for the silver. Akii Bua wins, and the new world record, taken the distance into a new era. Akii Bua, uninhibited, hurdling on both legs, sees he's got the world record, and he
he's put Hemery's 4-year-old Olympic and world record out of the books. And he wants to go on a lap of honour, and he's ignoring the officials who want him to go back, but enjoying the supreme moment in an athlete's life. David Hemery looks at the scoreboard where his world record has vanished.
He put it together beautifully. That's what I remember of it, really being astounded at the margin of victory, which was quite considerable, especially from lane one. He just did it close to perfection.
The 400 metres gold medal and new world record figures going to John Akii Bua of Uganda. The first world record to be broken in this 1972 track and field programme.
In the minds of so many people who competed, worked, or simply watched in Munich will also remain the sickening memory of an act of political terrorism. 2 days of death which drove people to wonder whether the Olympic Games, so vulnerable to extremists of all kinds, should ever be held again.
John's achievement will be forever overshadowed by the kidnapping and then murder of 11 members of the Israeli Olympic squad by the Palestinian terrorist group Black September. With the world still reeling in shock, the Games held a subdued closing ceremony. John said a muted farewell to Malcolm Arnold and stepped on his plane home to Idi Amin's Uganda.
Uganda, waye! Africa, waye!
Uganda's first ever Olympic gold medal winner landed back home to a hero's welcome. Idi Amin held a state reception for the returning athletes and rewarded them with cash. But under his increasingly brutal rule, Uganda was collapsing into a land drenched in violence. The dictator had exacted his revenge along tribal lines, leading the slaughter of the Langi and Acholi, the two tribes whom the British had favoured in the military and the police. Amin replaced them with men from tribes based in his remote home region and employed Nubians from outside the country to staff his most notorious killing squad, the State Research Bureau. Shortly before the Olympic team left for Munich, Amin had expelled 50,000 Asians, whom he blamed for monopolizing the economy at the expense of Africans. Amin's economic war initially received popular support, as John himself told a visiting journalist.
Asians are not good people to me. I am not educated. I do not know much about economics, but Asians stay off to themselves. They don't want to mix with black people. Once, in a busy restaurant, the only place for me was at a table with 3 Asians. When I sat down, they all went away without eating. I don't like that, so I don't care much if they leave the country.
Idi Amin soon turned his attention to the whites and former colonials, regularly humiliating them in public. John began to understand that under Idi Amin, no one was safe.
I work only according to the God's instruction.
I must confess that before Munich, I ignorantly and stupidly failed to understand anything of Idi Amin's rule.
Today, the people in Uganda are enjoying it. This is the truth.
After Munich, I came to believe very strongly that Amin's killer squads really existed and were on the path of a systematic liquidation of Uganda's elite. Amin's henchmen continued the atrocities in such a way that by the time the Langi and the Acholi realized what was happening, it was all over. After a near sweep of the top officers, intellectuals and administrators, the killer squads moved to the lower ranks. Some even collaborated with the killer squads to eliminate their own brothers, sisters, and fathers.
The expulsion of the Asians and dwindling presence of former colonials left a gaping hole in Ugandan public life. By liquidating his perceived enemies, Idi Amin was destroying the heart of Uganda's governing structure. Every night, the 5 o'clock news bulletin would announce who had been dismissed in the public interest. One such victim was Akii Bua's former mentor at the police training school, Stan Obongonyinke, one of 27 high-ranking officers dismissed on the same day.
If you were holding some position of responsibility, you were a kind of threat. They had to look at some people with reservation or suspicion. They perhaps would like you to do a few things and you wouldn't want to do it because your conscience tells you it is wrong. He survived because he was dismissed, because many of his friends that remained were picked and either they disappeared or they were right away killed. Some the bodies were found, some they didn't. It was hard.
During this period, I was still an assistant inspector stationed at the police training school. One day I was detailed to man a roadblock on one of the roads out of Kampala with my cousin, Dennis Obua, who was also a national footballer. Obua had already spent some horrible hours at the roadblock, where he witnessed soldiers of Nubian origin proudly showing their soldiers' knives covered in blood, followed by their horrifying tales. Obua was never again allowed near such work. Neither was I.
Our tribe, the Langis, were being victimized, were being murdered. So Amin liked it so that the world would know that he's not killing that tribe. For instance, if there was a complaint about human rights in Uganda, he would round us at night, me, Akii Bua, and some senior officers, police officers who were there, and army, and parade us on the TV. You are saying I'm killing the Langis. Who are these people? They are here. Inside you would feel bad, but you have to live. You have to survive. It was good for us to be superstars. If I scored one goal for Uganda team, I mean, would feel so happy. I knew I would stay for the whole of that year. Nobody would touch me. So I would work very hard to make sure that we shine.
The star status of Dennis Obua and John Akii Bua may have kept them safe, but there were other sportsmen, including Akii Bua's own brothers, whose achievements were in the distant past and provided no protection.
Three of my brothers were among the first police officers arrested and detained. They were not allowed visitors. 8 buses transported them to southern Uganda, near the Tanzanian border. My wife Joyce saw the buses pass our garden fence. It was said they were being taken to work at the Mutukula prison farm. We'd always believed they would be released, especially as one, James Ochen, was a top Ugandan athlete and the Army's highest point scorer in track and field. But as news of atrocities against Langi and Acholi soldiers and officers spread, any hope of their being released vanished. We later found out that Amin's soldiers executed them when they dynamited the jailhouse as they slept. Up till now, I still ponder about the whole episode. If I had tried to request their release, I could have managed to get them out. But I only knew the chief sports officer in the army, and he was killed soon after the coup. Even now, I see James a lot in my dreams. Sometimes he is at home, telling the whole family funny stories. Then I have violent images, full of deadly weapons. These dreams are never completed because they wake me up quickly.
With Uganda on the brink of economic chaos, Idi Amin moved to maintain the support of his remaining elite by handing out houses, cars and businesses that the Asians had been forced to abandon. John Akii Bua was granted one such well-appointed home, to which he moved from his grim police barracks without asking questions. His Olympic gold may have netted him a prime property in Kampala, but to live in Idi Amin's Uganda was to live in fear.
I did not meet Idi Amin more than 10 times. Most of these were at state functions. but one incident I will never forget. I was on my way for morning training when all of a sudden a car stopped in front of me. I swear I totally failed to identify the owner. It was President Amin. He ordered me to join him. I tried to predetermine my destiny, but drew blanks all the time.
Sit over there.
I followed Amin up to the first floor. I was terribly shaken and could not function. For 45 minutes, I twisted, pressed, and did all that I could with my 10 fingers. Then a sharp-pitched voice barked my name.
Akii Bua.
I saw the face of the caller. Colonel Malyumungo.
Fuata mimi.
His name was a terror to all alive in Uganda. To meet him was like a pause before a jump into an endless pit. When I got to the door of the meeting room, my heartbeat became audible to my ears. My mind delivered a verdict of guilty on my offense. I recall Amin spoke in Ugandan Kiswahili. I heard what he said, but it didn't stick in my mind. Though I stood in front of the officers, my eyes were completely out of focus. He told his officers that I had beaten the whites in Munich, that he had received a report that I didn't collaborate with imperialists or work with subversive elements. He said that I only like my sports, and he did not want to hear any envying against me. I only realized outside the building that Idi Amin had promoted me to Senior Superintendent of Police. I never told my fellow athletes about my ordeal that morning. We just trained together as if nothing had happened. That night, I called myself Senior Superintendent of Police over and over again. I felt constricted by the weight of promotion. I woke up in the morning with no clear explanation of who SSP Akii Bua was.
Hello, young man. How are you? Nice to see you again.
You're actually the first ones to see all these. The Ugandan uniform, 1972. This is what he wore with the Pan-African Games.
Right. You know about those spikes?
Yeah.
They were banned?
Yeah.
Yeah, 9/11. You're right. An Olympic gold medal. There aren't many of those, are there?
When he was Olympic champion and when he was running in Europe, there was a fair bit of money flying about for successful athletes even then, even though it was, you know, brown envelope stuff.
There's a story he used to tell me that the bottom screwed off. He put things in here when he came through customs. But we better hadn't say that.
He could have been made for life in that situation, and nowadays he could have earned substantial amounts of money as a result of being Olympic champion, but that wasn't to be.
Akii Bua back in business and will be a very serious threat in Montreal.
I used to travel quite a lot. You say I come from Uganda, and they would say, "Oh, the land of Akii Bua." Or if you don't say the land of Akii Bua, then they say, "Oh, the land of Idi Amin." You know, the two famous names were John Akii Bua on the positive side, and of course Idi Amin on the negative side. So that is what was there.
The world's 4 greatest 400-meter hurdles all drawn together. There's John Akii Bua. Pascoe's moving the better. John Akii Bua's chasing him hard.
John Akii Bua of Uganda, the reigning Olympic champion and world record holder. Pascoe battling away, but Akii Bua, the world record holder, holds on.
Now Akii Bua comes back again, but Pascoe may have him. Pascoe does have him.
Akii Bua is too good an athlete to be beaten too often.
Akii Bua really storming down that back straight. Akii Bua by himself, demonstrating the sort of form he'd want to show at the start of the Olympic season, because Akii Bua is looking a bit special.
I want to win a Malcolm Floyd.
But now another athletics outsider had emerged to set his sights on glory. Just as Britain's David Hemery had inspired Akii Bua, so the Ugandan was proving to be the motivation for a little-known American named Edwin Moses.
Akii Bua was the ultimate hurdler and first man to run under 48 seconds. And once he did it, and I saw the race on many occasions, then in my mind, when I came the next Olympic cycle, running under 48 was not impossible. So in 1975-76, when I was training seriously to go to the Olympic Games, I figured if he was doing that in some part of the world, by the time it's midday in the United States, you figured Akii Bua has been out on the track and is finished and recovering now. So you really have to step up your training in order to kind of catch up. So I always felt that I was like a half a day behind, and always had to do more in order to get even physically.
John Akii Bua arrived in Montreal believing he could perform memorably again. But with the African nations threatening a boycott, he had no idea if he would even be allowed to compete. The Africans were furious at the presence of New Zealand, who had recently sent a rugby team on a tour of South Africa, flouting the international sports embargo of the apartheid regime. After weeks of political posturing between the Africans and the International Olympic Committee, Idi Amin proclaimed it his duty to bring the Ugandan team home over the issue, seemingly oblivious to the human rights violations taking place in his country and on his orders.
In here, a black man slaughtering a black man, cutting off a man's private parts, put them in his mouth. Okay. And you're telling me that you want to go and tell a white South African that you're doing apartheid to the black South African. That's so ironical to me.
Personally, I wished I was not born in Uganda, because I had worked so hard, so much. And you know that's the age where you can exploit your talents. You are cheated.
As 28 African teams went home, the Games went on without them.
Moses wins 48.24, and that is fast. In fact, that is the fastest time in the world this year.
Personally, I thought it was tragic for someone like John Akii Bua. I met him in the stands, and I was fresh kid on the block, so I had a time of 48.30 at the time, but the buzz around me was that I was ready to break the record and could do it. And he encouraged me to run as fast as I could and break the record. He said, if you're gonna do it, this is the place to do it.
With my bags ready and the Kenyan team next to us, I was asked by an American TV company how I felt about the boycott personally. My reply to them was simple. I had gone to Montreal with my country's taxpayers' money, and they had the right to withdraw me from the Games. But when those old men had told me I couldn't run, I wanted to grab them by the neck. As the final of the 400 meters hurdles took place, I was almost 30,000 feet up on a Ugandan airplane heading home. Could I have won the gold medal? This is the question everybody asks.
And the world record of John Akii Bua, set 4 years ago, goes to this man, Ed Moses of America.
If I had run 48.5 and won a gold medal, people would have said, had Akii Bua been there, you probably wouldn't have won. So my whole psyche was on breaking the record. There's nothing personal against him. That's just how sports is. I wanted to reach my maximum potential and show that I was the best, not only on that day, but ever.
Idi Amin denied him the opportunity to go and defend his title, so he couldn't prove what he was. He went off the map so early, people began looking at him more like a policeman than a super athlete. That gold medalist, people who saw him as that began seeing him as, hey, just another ordinary person. It killed his spirit.
Every time I asked for permission to go abroad, there was suspicion I was fleeing into exile. My mistake was going to see Amin personally to plead to be allowed to run abroad. I thought he would listen because he had made me a national hero. He gave me assurances that he would give me clearance to travel, but I never received it. In the circumstances, it was difficult to embark on hopeful training. I had started to drink heavily and smoke cigarettes. I drank the whiskey straight from the bottle, sometimes a whole bottle a day when I could get it. Can you imagine that? Me, smoking and drinking. Because I had won the highest honor in track for my country, I couldn't go into exile. Uganda was, in effect, a prison.
After Montreal, to the world which had loved his style and his smile, John Akii Bua disappeared from view. In asking the president personally for clearance to travel abroad, he had courted a man whose behavior was becoming ever more erratic and callous. In 1977, Idi Amin committed one of his most infamous atrocities, ordering the murder of the Archbishop of Uganda and 2 cabinet ministers based on false evidence that they had plotted to overthrow him. A year later, he declared war on Tanzania, towards whom he had long been antagonistic, partly because Tanzania had accepted the deposed Milton Obote and was home to thousands of guerrilla fighters from John's Langi tribe, who had fled into exile after Amin took power. Akii Bua had believed his fame and neutrality would protect him from Amin's retribution, but now he was not so sure.
It was a joke always among people. When you talk of somebody who has abdicated the country, for example, you will refer to that person as having Akii Bua, you know, having run away. Oh, I went front page with John. That means I really ran.
In March 1979, Uganda's first ever world record-breaking hurdler began to plan his own Akii Bua. With the war tilting Tanzania's way and its army advancing on Kampala, his wife rang relatives on the Kenyan border for advice.
Auntie, things are getting worse and worse by the day. What do we do? I said, why don't you tell John to try to leave the country? But it was not very easy. Because whenever I talked to him on phone, he would say, Auntie, but I have done nothing. Not knowing that many people died actually without doing anything serious.
John felt that the safest thing to do was to send his wife, who was 5 months pregnant, and their 3 young children ahead to the border. He would remain behind until the last possible moment.
It was a tough one for her because here we are, she's pregnant, she's got 3 little kids. You just get a call in the middle of the night and you're told to get out of the house. And then you do the disappearing act, and it's one hell of a decision they had to make.
John Akii Bua knew he was a target not only for Amin's soldiers, who would see him as a Langi, but for his own people, who could regard him as a collaborator with Amin, as evidenced by his house, his car, and his promotion in the police.
I was ready to escape from the city. I began to witness the natives who couldn't hold their nerve any longer. I knew my vulnerability to Amin's army, and especially the SRB. I was a sitting duck.
This is the forward point of the Tanzanian invasion force, which is slowly but relentlessly pursuing Idi Amin's fleeing army. And the search is on for Ugandan deserters.
Stop! 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 Can you assist me and take my commanders to Jinja?
I don't have enough fuel. No. We have fuel here.
I heard them request a lift to Jinja, 80 kilometers away. At first I trembled, but quickly composed myself.
I have enough fuel. But we have fuel here. We can give you. I cannot take you to Jinja. See, I have been in a meeting with the general. I am going to Chambogo to pick a technician to take to the front line. Let me tell you, if you are joking, we can shoot. No, please. Okay, Hassan.
Disappointed and dejected, they let me go. I dismissed any idea of escaping Kampala. Ten volleys fell that day. There was panic. The war was in Kampala.
Despite his experience at the roadblock the previous day, Akii Bua decided that staying was even more dangerous than trying to flee. His cousin, the national footballer Dennis Obua, called him. They agreed to head for the Kenyan border together.
I bid an emotional farewell to two of my brothers. They were the only family eyewitnesses to see me leave alive in case I was heading for the worst.
The bomb started landing in Kampala. This terrorist surge became erratic. They are killing now anybody. So they didn't want to see anybody from our tribe in their face. And me and Akii decided to drive.
The dash to the border, over 200 kilometers away, would begin from here.
You're more than ready. I'm ready.
All Amin's troops were also fleeing. And the only route they would flee was via the east. They put roadblocks up to the border. Complete murder going on along the route. When you are from our people and the rest of it, you are just pulled out of the car and shot to death.
"18 kilometers outside Kampala, on the road to Jinja, we passed the West German Embassy's convoy. We had a hunch that by driving behind them, we stood a good chance of going through the roadblocks without stopping, or worst of all, being checked.
You drive while you're half dead because you don't know whom you're going to meet next. You know you are in trouble. You know you're in trouble.
We remained behind them and there was no stopping us through the almost 80 kilometers to Jinja.
Any Ugandans fleeing east would have to negotiate the Owen Falls Dam. This was where Idi Amin had notoriously disposed of many victims. And with his retreating force in disarray, the roadblock had acquired a gruesome reputation.
We came to a stop right in front of the Nile Beer Brewery and about 200 meters from the Owen Falls Dam. We thought the end of our journey had come. In Kampala, we heard of people being thrown into the crashing water. Others were lined up and ordered to jump in. My mind began to race. I tried to visualize how I would die. Were they going to throw me into the water? If so, with tied hands and legs, or with my hands and legs left free? I knew they would never find my body, know who killed me, or how I died. I thought about my wife and children, and could not bear my vision of their life without me. I told Dennis, if you don't think we'll be okay, we'll shoot it out. The possibility of a shootout became real when a State Research Bureau Datsun pulled up behind us.
He's coming.
We were to make sure that we stayed together so that it would be very difficult to pick one of us and kill. Either to pick me or to pick him.
The SRB guy in the car behind happened to recognize Obua and came up with a big, broad smile to talk to Dennis about soccer. He asked what we had come to do in Jinja, and Obua by instinct answered that we had come to collect some crates of beer and whiskies and expected to return to Kampala for lunch. He accepted our invitation to join us for a drink at the officers' mess that evening.
Okay, I'll be waiting for you, eh? Thank you. Okay.
An order was shouted from someplace that the packed cars should move to cross the bridge. Nobody had come to find out who we were or where we were going. I joined the convoy of diplomats' cars across the bridge, but the SRB car remained right on our tail. We were sure the SRB would want to know why we were driving towards Tororo.
You know what you have to do just in case.
I told Dennis to break the back window and start firing if they got too close.
Yeah, definitely.
But almost immediately, we saw their car take a turn.
Here we go.
I put my foot on the gas and drove as fast as I dared. In Uganda, the roads are bad, and I was driving like a rally driver. All along the 130 kilometers to Tororo, we never met another vehicle.
Tororo was a border town in the east of Uganda, where Akii Bua's aunt had agreed to help smuggle him and his family into Kenya.
Tororo town itself was not safe. The roadblocks were everywhere, and Akii Bua, being what he was, anybody looking at him would know him. So I had to keep them in the house while I scout around.
We remained in hiding in their house for 2 days and discussed how to cross into Kenyan territory and take a temporary shelter. We would return when things are safe and join hands to welcome our brothers and the liberators. We agreed on the escape routes, time, and day. The plan was for Dennis Abua and my wife and 3 kids to go on foot. I was to drive the car and cross into Kenya near a small trading center.
It was a great risk. I was aware of it. I was prepared for it. I knew if I were found helping people like Akii Bua to escape, that would be either firing squad or being picked and never be seen. I knew the risks.
At 12 p.m., we had our last lunch in Uganda and bid farewell and good luck to my wife in an emotional and tearful parting. Within an hour, Santa returned and exclaimed in jubilation that they had crossed safely.
We prayed over how Akii Bua was going to live, and I thought the best way for him to live was to act like a senior police officer going out on supervision. The way I looked at him, he almost lacked confidence. He said, "Auntie, can I make it?" I said, "You can. Just be yourself. Be confident."
Akii Bua headed to an agreed location from which to cross illegally into Kenya. He had arranged for a safe house where his family could reunite. But such was the suspicion on the Kenyan side towards any Ugandan who crossed. No one could be sure who would make it.
The motor road belonged to Uganda and the shops to Kenya. I was to leave the road just 100 meters away from the next roadblock and enter Kenya's land. I quickly changed into a civilian dress and neatly folded my uniform and put it behind the boot. The area was infested with Amin's soldiers, and I feared if my car was spotted, they were likely to shoot me. I was prepared to take any action to save myself and cross into Kenya. I fought terribly hard to hide my tears when I saw my wife and our 3 children. But 10 days later, calamity struck. The trauma of the journey resulted in my wife giving birth 3 months early. The baby lived for just 24 hours. We had no money for the burial. Idi Amin had his final revenge on my family. I can never forgive him for that.
Akii Bua, uninhibited, sees he's got the world record, enjoying the supreme moment in an athlete's life.
I found out when I was head coach for the British team, and we went to the European Cup in Munich, and it was in the stadium where John won the gold medal.
Hey.
Yeah, in 1972, same stadium, Olympic Stadium, and we were there, and the journalist in the stadium told me then that he died. So it was ironic, really, very strange. The public at large never knew too much about him after 1972-73. Those of us who knew him and the athletics aficionados remembered him, but that was it, really.
A superb run by the African. the event has progressed 4 years.
The last time Malcolm Arnold saw John, the athlete had a gift for his former mentor.
He came over to Wales when I was national coach for Wales and presented me with these 12 exercise books. He presented them to me as his life story and asked me to look after them, all written in pencil, in English, I think brilliantly written considering it was in his third or fourth language. It was staggering stuff.
John entrusted Malcolm to safeguard his writings, which began with his life in the village and ended with his arrest in Kenya. With Idi Amin now deposed and in exile, there was a call for retribution against those who had benefited from his rule. In Kenya, John's fame counted for nothing. Still grieving the death of his baby son, he was arrested, sent to a holding camp, and faced deportation back to Uganda. No one knew of his plight until a foreign film crew stumbled upon him.
I've never felt so miserable, you know. I feel I just don't know what I can say. I've not taken a shower since. You know, you can see my head, you can see my beard. I've never shaved this. You can't explain anything to anybody here.
The shocking images of an Olympic champion in such dire circumstances prompted one man to act. Armin Dassler, the head of the Puma Sports Company, personally arranged for the Akii Bua family's asylum in West Germany and handed John a job in the sports marketing department.
Und man hat auch nicht vergessen, wir als Puma haben uns ja gesonnt in seiner Goldmedaille in München und haben ihn ja auch in vielen Kampagnen herausgestellt als unseren Partner, der mit unserer Marke, mit unseren Schuhen olympisches Gold geholt hat. Ja, und so einen Partner, den kann man ja nicht dann im Regen stehen lassen oder plötzlich, wenn er Hilfe braucht, ihn außen vor zu lassen. Außerdem wusste auch jeder im Hause, dass die Familie Dassler voll hinter John Akii Bua und seiner Familie stand. Und so war das also eine problemlose Geschichte, dass er in unsere große Familie aufgenommen wurde. Er hat leider, das muss ich sagen, er war ja ein liebenswerter Kerl, hat auch alles gemacht. Aber er hat sich nicht bemüht, Deutsch zu lernen. Er saß immer an seinem Schreibtisch und lächelte die Leute an, und mit denen er reden konnte. Auf Englisch hat er auch gesprochen. Dann hat mal einer gesagt, wenn ich nochmal zur Welt komme, dann werde ich John Akii Bua bei Puma.
We were the only black family living at that time in Herzegovina. So, I mean, you'd walk on the street and guys are like... But we kind of like managed to get around it.
Wir sitzen so am Tisch und meine Tochter macht auf einmal bei Turnier, greift so an die Haut und fühlt. Und mir da war das unheimlich peinlich und hab die Joyce erschreckt angeguckt. Und im gleichen Atemzug macht Turnier bei meiner Tochter an den blonden Haaren so, weil sie auch mal fühlen wollte, wie sich das anfühlt. Und da war das wieder aufgehoben, die Peinlichkeit.
With the jokes that we used to share a lot with my dad, I used to actually spin a lot of stories for them. Like I had this one year when I told them that, you know what, I actually went hunting and I killed a lion. So have you killed one? And you'd see someone going like, you killed a lion, you killed a lion. And I'm like, okay, so where do you sleep? Top of a tree? And that's really something that was fantastic when it came to Dad. It was marvelous. Yeah.
Aber das Heimweh, das war immer wieder mal sehr tief im Gespräch herauszuhören. Und er hat immer irgendwo gesagt, irgendwann, wenn die Zeit reif ist, werde ich wieder zurückgehen nach Uganda.
Der Vater dachte weiter, dachte von seinen Wurzeln her und den Plänen, die er hatte. Und da dachte er, es ist ihm lieber, wenn seine Kinder Afrikaner bleiben.
No longer at the mercy of Idi Amin, John returned to competition and began to plan for the Olympics in Moscow. It had been over 3 years since he had raced regularly.
Well, a nostalgic note, John Akii Bua, the Olympic champion for Uganda, making a return to the track. He escaped the Amin regime and making a comeback to international athletics. Not in his best form yet, but nice to see him back anyway.
I knew that he wasn't in top shape. I didn't want to rub it in. because I knew that I was so much better at the time. I mean, I had lowered the world record to 47.45.
Akii Bua making no impression at all.
I respected him for even being out on the track and the type of condition he was versus the type of condition he was running in 1972. It takes a lot of guts to do that. I don't think I would have done it.
But yet again, politics intervened. The US led a boycott of the Games following the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, which prevented Ed Moses from defending his crown. Still living in exile, John was proud to represent his country, but Uganda's new government declared they would not send a team. When they changed their mind, John had little time to prepare.
John Akii Bua from Uganda, and Oates comes off the bend the better. Vasiliev is chasing him of the Soviet Union, and Uganda's John Akii Bua is run out of it.
Er ist zurückgekommen 1980 und man hat gemerkt, er hat irgendwie die Interesse verloren. Das Interesse verloren A am Sport und B natürlich so weit von seiner Heimat entfernt zu leben. Das hat sich auch teilweise eben so gezeigt, dass er im Büro im Grunde genommen ja tagelang eben gesessen war, die Füße am Tisch und einfach vor sich hin sinniert hat und seine Freundlichkeit und auch seine Ausstrahlung, die haben sehr darunter gelitten. Man hat also gemerkt, er hat einfach Heimweh.
Das war die erste Zeit wunderschön, aber von dem Ruhm von 1972 konnte er nicht ein Leben lang leben. Das war ihm auch bewusst und er brauchte ein neues Ziel.
In 1983, John was persuaded by government representatives that the situation on the ground was improving in Uganda and that it was safe to return home. But Kampala, to which he arrived as a teenager with such hope, was now the capital city of a brutalized nation. Long gone was the hope driven by independence. Any sporting structure and organization inherited from the colonials was a distant memory. The initial relief at the overthrow of Idi Amin had been followed by years of instability and an apparently perpetual cycle of violence and fear.
I don't know how many coups and governmental breakdowns that they had, but I know that there was virtually no health services, no infrastructure. The country was just totally decimated, no financial output, so there was nothing there for him to gain.
In Germany, he had dreams of owning a sports retail outlet in Kampala. He even had ambitions of a sports academy in his name and went so far as to draw up plans. But he had neither the money nor the connections to accomplish any part of his vision. Compounding his problems was a legal battle over his house. Its former owner was seeking compensation for his loss under Idi Amin. John had been gifted the house, but had no deeds to it, and the issue was a low priority for the government. Even now, the ownership of the house remains unresolved, and his children live under the constant threat of eviction.
When he came back, he had lost a lot of things. He had lost a lot of property. Most of his property from the house were looted. At one time, he would tell me how unhappy he was for all that he had achieved for this country and for the police. He was at the same rank, and at the same time, he was poor. He was a poor man.
John was given his job back in the police force, but recruiting strategies had changed, and he was often undermined by university graduates who sneered at his lack of education and his promotion by Idi Amin. He tried his hand at coaching athletes, but grew frustrated at their unwillingness to absorb the gruelling training schedules he had once devoured. Akii Bua was never again given a promotion in over 20 years of service. When an anti-corruption law was passed, requiring all police officers to declare their assets, he refused to comply.
I remember an officer came from Inspectorate of Government to tell him that he had few hours to declare his assets. And John looked into his eyes, and then he said, "Which assets?" I thought, this law required us to declare our wealth, not our poverty. So I'm not going to declare. Would you expect him to be happy? He wasn't.
It was to be 20 years after his Munich victory before any sporting body truly utilised his talent and attraction for the benefit of Ugandan sports.
I used him especially to propagate sport, mainly to the youth in this country. Just the mention of John Akii Bua, everybody would become mesmerized to meet this great man. So I think he did wonderfully for me. He served my purposes, and I was so grateful to him.
In 1997, 25 years after Munich, John Akii Bua died. He was just 47 years old. As his wife had died 2 years earlier, his 11 children were left orphaned without the safety net of a welfare state. At his death, Parliament declared him a national hero, and every MP pledged 100,000 Ugandan shillings for the family. Only 8 were true to their word.
He had one very good run in Munich.
Malcolm Arnold went on to become one of the world's greatest athletics coaches. Now approaching retirement, Beijing is his 11th Olympics. In a career that began 4 decades ago, he has coached several more Olympic gold medalists, world champions, and world record holders. But it's for his first protege, who trained harder and ran faster than the world thought possible, that he reserves his greatest admiration.
It's interesting how much things have changed in this country. But one wonders, what next? The memory of track and field athletics in Uganda, to me, it's so live, and I know what it used to be like, and it's all gone.
I feel very sad about it, really, because we worked hard. I worked hard here for 5 years to set things up, and we saw success. There's no police club now. There's no track at the police. It's, they're growing maize on it. I suppose, as they say in the Bible, as ye sow, so shall ye reap. And they're sowing maize and not athletes. Prisons used to turn up in the coach like this, didn't they? And the police team and the army team.
There is no more discus, no more shot put, no more javelin. But I suppose we don't even have actual hurdles now. Maybe they need Malcolm again.
No. Too old now. One of my most recent successes in coaching was Colin Jackson, and I worked with Colin for 20 years. I never got that chance with John Akii. Had I been able to work with John for, 10 years, I just wonder where he would have ended up. But considering he only really had 2 seasons at it, 2 proper seasons at it, he did quite well, didn't he? If we could transfer him from his age in the 70s to now, he would be a winner still.
Coming on the inside, and David Hemery now with 3 to go. Hemery, the Olympic champion, lead. Akii Bua coming on the inside. 2 hurdles to go, and Akii Bua of Uganda's coming, and so too is Rolf Mann. Next to the last barrier, and Akii Bua leads from Hemery. The last one to go, and the African's going to win it. Hemery in second place, and Rolf Mann finally for the silver. Akii Bua wins, and the new world record, taken the distance into a new era.